True to form, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has broken her commitment to progressive lawmakers. So first, let me show you what she said back in June of this year.
So let me be really clear on this. We will not take up a bill in the House until the Senate passes the bipartisan bill and a reconciliation bill. Make sure you understand this. That when people say, well, I'm not going to vote for this unless I see that, there ain't going to be no bipartisan bill unless we are going to have the reconciliation bill.
So even though she appeared to forget the name of the bill there for a second, it's pretty clear what she was saying in both of those clips. She says there at the end, quote, there ain't going to be no bipartisan bill unless we are going to have the reconciliation bill, linking the bipartisan infrastructure bill that already passed the Senate, linking that to the budget reconciliation bill that has real investments into childcare, expansion of Medicare, lower prescription drug prices, or the ability for Medicare to negotiate down prescription drug prices, a real investment into the climate crisis, taxes on the wealthy and large corporations, and a lot more in that budget bill that actually invests into people. This is why progressives initially agreed to this, because even though the infrastructure bill is terrible, is largely a giveaway to corporations, they agreed to vote on that, to support that in exchange for passing the budget reconciliation bill. This is why these two bills were moving in tandem up until now, as Pelosi has appeared to break this promise with this article here out in Politico saying Pelosi steers Dems toward infrastructure votes without spending bill in tow. She signaled to her caucus she was no longer planning to pass both the party line social spending bill and infrastructure at the same time. So apparently Monday night, Pelosi had a meeting with her caucus and said that she is no longer going to support having both at once, or waiting for the budget bill to pass first before taking up the infrastructure bill. Instead, she's going to take up the infrastructure bill this week. But will she have the votes? Pelosi is known for not taking up bills unless she knows she's going to pass them. Well, if she has the votes, it doesn't appear at this point to be coming from the Progressive Caucus. So you have here the CPC standing very strong, saying here in a tweet, we just wrapped a meeting of our 96-member caucus, and we are clear. Our position on infrastructure and Build Back Better remains unchanged. We will not leave anyone behind. They put out a statement here that says, in part, quote, this agenda is not some fringe wish list. It is Joe Biden's agenda, the Democratic agenda, and what we all promised voters when they delivered us the House, the Senate, and the White House. They're very clear. So, unless Republicans are going to cross over and support the infrastructure bill, support that vote in the House, like 19 of them did in the Senate, then this ain't going to pass. But I'll get to more on that in a bit here. First, I want to show you some of the reactions online from members of the Progressive Caucus, like Rashida Talib, who tweeted out here, let me be clear, bringing the so-called bipartisan infrastructure plan to a vote without the Build Back Better Act at the same time is a betrayal. We will hold the line and vote it down. This is not the time for half measures or to go back on our promises. So this is you can't get any clearer than this. Right out, she is saying what Pelosi is doing is a betrayal. If she does in fact take up the vote for the infrastructure bill this week before there is a passage of the budget bill, that is betraying what she had promised the caucus. Another reaction here from Jamal Bowman saying, I won't support the bipartisan infrastructure framework without reconciliation. We can invest in our people and green infrastructure now, or we can pay the cost with human lives and livelihoods later. Also, Chuy Garcia, not as high profile as some of these other members, but he also tweets out here in support saying, I've been clear from the start, these bills move together or they don't move at all. Ilhan Omar tweeting out the whip count was right. We aren't bluffing when the bills are up in tandem and we will put our votes on the board. That's the deal. So House caucus, the Progressive Caucus, very clear in their position. Now to be even more clear, it's not, my understanding, it's not the entirety of the Progressive Caucus. It's about 60 of the 96 members, according to the last count by Pramila Jayapal. So it's not the whole caucus, but it's still a large chunk, large enough that Democrats cannot pass the infrastructure bill without them, unless Pelosi gets Republicans on board in the House. But more here. So I showed you the support from the House, also in the Senate. So Bernie Sanders, who, by the way, in case you're wondering why didn't he block the infrastructure bill in the summer, he was one guy and there were 19 Republicans in support. So even if he had voted against it, it wouldn't have made a difference. But he tweeted out here, no infrastructure bill should pass without a $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. That is the agreement that was made, and that is the agreement that must be kept. Physical infrastructure is important, but the needs of working families and combating climate change is more important. And he is exactly right here. And it's also a window into why 19 Republicans signed off to support the infrastructure bill in the Senate, because the bipartisan infrastructure bill is largely a conservative infrastructure bill. It is largely a giveaway to private entities. That is why it has so much conservative support. That's why it passed so easily compared to this budget reconciliation bill. It has a real investment into people. But Bernie continues here, speaking to Jeff Stein. He says, you tell me what to cut. Tell the working families of this country we don't need to make childcare affordable. Tell the younger people we should not address the crisis of climate change. Tell the homeless people we should not build affordable housing. So basically he's saying here, if you want to cut this, then what should we cut? Should we cut help to working families? Should we cut should we cut investments into climate change? Should we cut housing for people that can't afford homes? Because everything in the budget bill is there to help people. Now, as I'll get to shortly, there is a potential way to cut this bill down and still keep everything there. So we'll get to that in a second. This is an analysis from a writer for the American Prospect. But before I get to that, one last thing. There were other senators that are also right in line with Bernie Sanders. So Chris Murphy saying here, quote, I voted for the bipartisan infrastructure bill under the impression that the two were tied together. Had I known they weren't, I might have approached it differently. I get it, circumstances change, but there's no doubt it's frustrating for those of us who believe it would have been better keeping them together. Also, Elizabeth Warren saying we had a deal, and that deal was in place long before we voted here in the Senate. So, calling to the deal that Nancy Pelosi was discussing that they both passed together. And really passed the budget bill first, because we all know that if they passed the infrastructure bill first in the House, then they're not going to get to the budget bill, because you're not going to then convince conservative Democrats like Manchin and Sinema to jump on board with the budget bill once the infrastructure bill is already passed. So that's why there's this entire fight against Pelosi here to bring this vote up this week, because if that vote comes this week and it actually passes, then the budget bill's dead. So a couple last things here. This from American Prospect writer Harold Meyerson saying how Democrats can pass the entire reconciliation bill. So this is an attempt here, even though I don't think it would work, but an attempt to try and appeal to the so-called moderates, but in reality, the corporate tools, the conservative Democrats, Manchin, Sinema, in their desire to cut down the budget bill, but in reality, they don't want the bill at all. But if they were to make this concession on the price tag, the 3.5 trillion price tag, this is how it would be done. So he says here, still fully fund every program in the 3.5 trillion package, but not for the next decade, but instead for the next 4 years. Saying here, the advantages that accrue to this course are social, economic, and most pointedly, political. It would make the 2024 election a referendum on whether the public wishes to continue those programs by further funding them or prefers to end them. Democrats would run on preserving the programs and re-upping their funding. That would compel Republicans to run against what should be widely popular policies, whether or not they nominate Donald Trump for president, but especially if they did, as Trump, even more than his GOP underlings, opposes everything Joe Biden supports. So this would be the path forward if it's actually possible to pass this budget bill simply by cutting the number. If that actually is sufficient for Manchin and Sinema, though I doubt it is, but if that were sufficient, then this would be the way to do it. Fully fund these programs for 4 years instead of 10 years, meaning that Democrats can then run on it in 2024. And once those policies are in place, like universal pre-K, lower prescription drug prices, expansion of Medicare, including dental, vision, and hearing for seniors, investments into climate change, and more. They're going to clearly be very popular and will be tough for Republicans to then try and run against it and reverse all of that support that people at that point will have become accustomed to. So similar to Obamacare in the sense that once it was in, it was very hard for Republicans to try and reverse it. And they tried again and again and again, but they never got it done. So, and that is different as well in the sense that Obamacare had a lot more opposition at the time in terms of even the public opposition to it. Whereas the budget bill, everything in the budget bill, according to all polling, is incredibly popular. So it has the support of the public. It has the support of the majority of Democrats, even Biden, at one time, Pelosi, maybe even still, though obviously not really, but Schumer and so on. So it has actual Democratic support. It has public support, but you have Manchin and Sinema against it, and that is completely stunting the ability for them to pass this budget bill. Last thing, since I don't think Pelosi is going to be able to get progressives, enough of them, to support the infrastructure bill if she actually brings it up for a vote this week, the only other place she can look at this point is Republicans. So you even have Republican senators here basically coming out and saying, why aren't House Republicans in support of this infrastructure bill? Because they also understand, as I said earlier, they understand it's a giveaway to corporations. So they're kind of hinting here, why don't House Republicans also support it? Showing that potentially there may be some cracks in the Republican opposition to the infrastructure bill. So if Pelosi can get enough Republicans on board in the House, though it seems unlikely, but they got senators, there's a chance here. If she can get Republicans on board, then that changes the entire calculus and completely destroys the budget bill. I mean, it would actually, not to give them any ideas here, because I don't think they're watching, but it would be smart strategy on the part of Republicans in the House to support the infrastructure bill, because then they would definitely put the nail in the coffin of in the budget bill. But all of this goes down this week. So is Pelosi actually going to bring the infrastructure bill up for a vote? Is she going to delay it because she knows that she doesn't have the votes? We're going to have to wait and see how that all plays out. But at this point, it's good to see that progressives are still standing strong in opposition, sticking to the original deal that they want to see that budget bill passed first before they support the infrastructure bill.